I've been with my wife, Maya, for 10 years, married for 7. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but until recently, I honestly thought we had something close to perfect. We share a son, Liam, who's in high school now, and for the most part, life has been straightforward. A comfortable home, steady jobs, and a circle of close friends we've grown up with and trust. But things started to change. It was subtle at first, a shift I couldn't exactly place. Maya was still Maya, but she seemed distant in some strange way. She'd go out more often, and I figured it was just her reconnecting with friends after the pandemic. I didn't think much of it at first. We both knew how to give each other space, and she'd always come home at the end of the night, sometimes slipping into bed hours after I'd fallen asleep. The nights out became more frequent, though. She'd have excuses lined up that she shared in a rush, almost trying to convince herself. I remember one evening when she was texting at dinner, barely noticing the food on her plate. When I asked who she was chatting with, she brushed it off, saying it was a work emergency. But her face betrayed a mix of excitement and nervousness I hadn't seen in years. One Saturday, Maya left for a quick errand, and hours passed without a word from her. I finally called, and she didn't pick up. That uneasy feeling, the one where you know something's off but can't bear to confront it, settled deep in my gut. I wanted to believe her, to chalk it up to stress or maybe even just bad timing. But I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, and I feared where this was heading. That night, Maya came home hours later than she'd said. She gave me a quick excuse, something about meeting an old friend, but there was a detachment in her voice, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. My mind started racing with doubts. I wanted to shake off the suspicion, tell myself that I was overthinking, that I knew my wife, that she'd never do anything to hurt our family. But I couldn't sleep. I got up, took my phone, and started scrolling through memories, photos from vacations, moments with Liam, late nights where we'd fall asleep talking. I needed to remember the Maya I knew, the Maya I trusted. But instead, my gut told me to dig deeper. The next day, when Maya went out again for errands, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked through her things. Her laptop was sitting open on the dining table, and I went straight to her messages. At first, there was nothing. Just routine conversations, her chatting with friends about plans for the weekend or work issues. But when I clicked on a messaging app she rarely used, I saw something that stopped me cold. There were messages from a contact named Jay. Jay was someone I knew, one of my own close friends, someone we trusted to be part of our inner circle. The messages were explicit, plans for secret meetups, things I never thought I'd read. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through texts that confirmed every suspicion and fear I hadn't wanted to face. When Maya got home, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. The betrayal was a knife twisting in my gut, and I was still reeling. All I knew was that this wasn't a single mistake. It was an ongoing thing, a full-fledged affair with someone we both trusted. The night after discovering the messages, I felt like I was in a fog. I stayed awake, replaying those messages in my head, each word chipping away at any faith I still had in our marriage. She was lying beside me, asleep, breathing peacefully, and I couldn't understand how she could look so calm. Did she even feel guilty? How long had she been going behind my back with Jay? Did she ever think about what it would do to me, to Liam, to our life? In the morning, I decided I couldn't let it fester. I had to confront her. I needed to hear her side of the story, even if I knew it would shatter what little strength I had left. So that Saturday morning, I waited until Liam left for soccer practice, and then I sat Maya down in the kitchen. I remember my hands shaking, barely able to keep my coffee cup steady. I wanted to keep my composure, but my voice came out like a stranger's when I asked, "Is there something you need to tell me?" She looked up, eyes widening for a split second, but then she quickly recovered. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady, almost too calm. I wanted to believe that maybe I'd imagined her reaction, that she was still the person I thought I knew. But I'd read the messages. I knew the truth. I just needed her to admit it. "I know about Jay," I said, barely getting the words out. My throat was tight, and it felt like I was on the verge of breaking down right there. Her face turned pale, and I watched her eyes flicker with something. Fear, regret, maybe shame. But she didn't look away, didn't try to deny it. That almost made it worse. I wanted her to lie, to try and save face, to say it was all a mistake. But the silence said everything. How did you find out? She asked, her voice small. There was no denial, no attempt to gaslight me. And in that moment, the hope I'd been clinging to, that maybe it was a misunderstanding or some cruel joke, crashed down around me. It doesn't matter how I found out, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. What matters is that you did this. With him, of all people. He was our friend, Maya. Did that mean anything to you? Her eyes filled with tears, but I was too angry to care. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. The words were like a punch to the gut. I felt a wave of anger surge through me, stronger than I'd ever felt before. You don't know what to say? I repeated, incredulous. How about explaining why? How long, Maya? How long have you been doing this behind my back? Her tears finally spilled over, and she took a deep breath before speaking. It started a few months ago, she admitted, her voice shaking. We were just talking at first, catching up on old times. I was feeling distant, and he was just there. I never meant for it to go this far. You didn't mean for it to go this far? I snapped, my voice rising. What did you think would happen, Maya? You betrayed me. You betrayed us. You betrayed Liam. I could see the guilt in her eyes, and part of me wanted her to suffer, to feel every bit of the pain she'd inflicted on me. But another part of me, a part one hated in that moment, wanted to believe her, to somehow justify what she had done. Did you ever plan on telling me? I asked, my voice softer now, though I hated how vulnerable it sounded. Or was I supposed to just live in the dark while you carried on with him? She looked down, her silence answering the question. She had no plans to come clean. If I hadn't found out, she would have kept it buried, leaving me to live in the lie. I stood up, needing to get out of that room before I lost control. I couldn't even look at her. I walked out, my heart shattered, wondering if I'd ever be able to put it back together again. After I walked out of that room, I felt like I was running on fumes. My mind was racing, jumping between anger, despair, and confusion. How could she betray everything we'd built? And with him? A man I trusted, someone who'd been at our dinner table countless times, talking and laughing with our family. Every memory we shared now felt tainted, twisted by the knowledge of what they'd done. I spent the next few days in a haze, barely speaking to Maya. Every time I looked at her, I saw betrayal in her eyes, and I couldn't shake the image of her with Jay. We tiptoed around each other in silence, and even though Liam was oblivious, I could tell he was picking up on the tension. He'd ask if I was okay or if Mom and I had a fight, and I'd just force a smile, reassuring him that everything was fine. But the truth was that everything was far from fine. One evening, I drove out to clear my head and ended up in front of Jay's apartment building. I didn't plan to confront him, but something inside me snapped. Before I knew it, I was pounding on his door. When he opened it, his face went white, like he'd seen a ghost. You and I need to talk, I said, my voice cold. He opened the door a little wider, and I stepped inside, fighting the urge to slam him against the wall. Why? I demanded. Why would you do this? You knew what we had, what we were trying to build for our family. Jay looked down, avoiding my gaze. Look, man, I never meant for it to happen. I don't know what to say. We were both going through things, and I guess I just got caught up in it. Got caught up? That's your excuse? I said, my voice shaking with anger. You destroyed my marriage, my family. For what? A few moments of feeling good? A thrill? Jay shifted uncomfortably, still refusing to meet my eyes. I don't expect you to understand, but it just happened. I know it was wrong, but I cut him off, my anger boiling over. You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how a friend could betray someone like this, how you could look me in the eye all this time while you were sleeping with my wife. He flinched, and for a brief moment, I saw something in his expression, regret, maybe, or guilt, but it didn't matter. Nothing he could say would make this right. After a tense silence, he finally looked up, his face lined with something resembling remorse. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much, but I really am sorry. I scoffed, the bitterness rising in my throat. Sorry doesn't cut it, Jay. Sorry doesn't fix the damage you've done. You took everything I thought was real and shattered it. And now, I'm left to pick up the pieces. I turned and walked out of his apartment, slamming the door behind me. As I stood outside, trying to catch my breath, I realized that nothing could make this right. Not apologies, not explanations. Jay and Maya had made their choices, and now I was the one left standing in the wreckage. After confronting Jay, I returned home feeling both drained and furious. Confronting him hadn't given me the closure I thought it would. It just deepened the wound. I couldn't look at Maya without thinking about how quickly she had turned our life upside down for a few months of excitement. She and Jay had shared things that were supposed to be ours, things that once made our life feel so complete. Days went by, and I tried to distance myself from Maya emotionally, but she kept trying to get me to talk, pleading for forgiveness, saying it was a mistake. She kept repeating that she wanted us to work through this, that she was willing to go to counseling or do anything to earn my trust back. But trust? How could I even begin to think about trust after this? One night, she sat across from me in the living room, looking exhausted. She'd been crying, and I could tell the guilt was eating her up. "Please, just let me explain," she said softly. "I know I hurt you. I know it's not something I can ever take back, but I don't want to lose our family. I don't want Liam to grow up in a broken home." Her words hit me hard. The idea of tearing our family apart felt like a new wound. I wanted to hold on for Liam's sake, but I couldn't ignore the betrayal. "What do you expect me to do, Maya?" I said, my voice heavy. "Just pretend that nothing happened? Act like everything is okay?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, I know I can't ask you to forget, but I need you to know that this didn't mean anything. I don't love him. I never did. I was just lonely." "Lonely?" I repeated, stunned. "You were lonely, so you thought an affair with my friend would fix that?" Maya broke down, sobbing, her head in her hands. I watched her, torn between wanting to comfort her and feeling the anger flare up inside me again. I got up and walked out of the room, desperate for air, and ended up in the kitchen where I could barely hold back my own tears. Then, a few days later, as if I hadn't already hit my breaking point, another blow came. Maya had gone out, claiming she needed some time to think, to clear her head. I stayed home with Liam, trying to keep things normal for his sake. But as I walked past her phone, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter, it buzzed with a message notification. I ignored it at first, but something made me pause. The message was from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I unlocked her phone. There, in her recent messages, was a thread that made my blood run cold. She'd been messaging Liam, my own son. The tone of their messages had been light, friendly even, and nothing inappropriate, but it was clear that they'd been talking behind my back. Liam was sharing things with his mother that he hadn't shared with me, about school, his friends, even his hopes and fears about college. I stared at the screen, numb. It wasn't an affair, but it was another betrayal, a motherly betrayal. She had kept this line of communication hidden, as if she didn't want me to know about the connection she was trying to maintain with Liam. When she got back that evening, I confronted her. "Are you trying to undermine my relationship with our son?" I asked, holding up her phone with the message thread open. She looked startled, and then defensive. "I was just talking to him, that's all. He needs his mother right now, too. Why are you making it seem like it's something awful?" "Because it feels like you're shutting me out of my own family," I shouted. "First, you destroy my trust, and now you're trying to take Liam away from me?" Maya broke down again, but this time I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. All I felt was a hollow emptiness as I realized that she wasn't just taking away the life I'd known. She was taking away my son, little by little, through quiet conversations that excluded me from the family I'd fought to keep together. I walked away, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt, trying to grapple with the reality that Maya had shattered not just our marriage, but my place in our family. Over the following days, the weight of what Maya had done, both with Jay and now with Liam, felt like an anchor around my neck. My own home felt foreign to me, like every corner held some memory tainted by her betrayal. I'd find myself avoiding Maya, avoiding any space where I might have to talk to her, even if it meant wandering around town late at night just to delay coming back. I kept telling myself it was all for Liam, but inside, I was slipping further from the life we'd built together. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Liam's school. He'd been in a fight, which was completely out of character for him. I rushed over, thinking about what could have provoked him. When I arrived at the principal's office, Liam was sitting outside the door, a bruise forming on his cheek and his knuckles red. As soon as he saw me, he looked away, clearly upset. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back my anger and confusion, and sat down next to him. "Liam, what happened?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He shrugged, refusing to meet my gaze. "It's nothing, Dad. Just some jerks talking." But I wasn't going to let it slide. "What did they say?" Liam glanced around, clearly uncomfortable, and then whispered, They said that she was seeing someone else. That everyone knows. One of the guys even called me a loser, saying my mom's cheating on my dad, and I just snapped. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. The thought of Liam having to hear about his mother's affair from strangers at school filled me with a new kind of anger. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Liam, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. It's all just a mess. But I promise, none of this is your fault." Liam looked up, his eyes filled with pain. "Dad, is it true? Did she really cheat on you?" My heart broke hearing him ask that question, the innocence in his voice shattered by things he should never have had to think about. I hesitated, not knowing how much to say. "Yes," I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. "Your mom, she made some mistakes. And it hurt me. It hurt all of us." He looked down, clenching his fists. "So it's all true," he murmured, a mixture of sadness and anger flashing across his face. "She's just lying to everyone." I wanted to tell him that it was more complicated than that people made mistakes, that maybe there was some path to forgiveness. But the words wouldn't come. I couldn't pretend everything was okay when it felt like everything I'd known was crumbling around me. "Liam," I said softly, "I know this is hard. It's hard for me too. But no matter what happens between your mom and me, I'm here for you. Always. I need you to know that." He nodded, but he didn't look reassured. He seemed lost, like he didn't know who to trust anymore. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. We sat there in silence for a few more minutes, both of us trying to process what was happening. When we finally left the school, Liam spoke up again, his voice bitter. "So, what now? Are you and Mom? Are you going to get a divorce?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd barely managed to get through each day since I found out. But the word divorce hung heavy between us, a possibility that now felt impossible to ignore. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I'm still trying to figure things out. But whatever happens, we'll make it through this together." He looked at me, searching my face for any sign of certainty, and all I could give him was a small, strained smile. As we headed home, I could feel a rift between us that hadn't been there before. I tried to shield him from the truth, but now that he knew, there was no turning back. We were both trapped in a reality we couldn't escape, facing a future I could barely imagine. The car ride home with Liam was filled with an unbearable silence. I tried to reassure him that he could talk to me, that I'd be there for him no matter what, but he didn't say much. Every so often, I'd catch him glancing out the window, his face hardened and pensive. I could only imagine the storm of thoughts raging in his mind. He'd just discovered that the solid foundation of his family was riddled with cracks. When we got home, Liam headed straight to his room. I followed, pausing outside his door, hoping he might invite me in, that he might still see me as the one stable part of his life. But the door clicked shut, leaving me on the other side with the silence of a house that no longer felt like home. I turned and walked down the hall, each step heavy. My hands shook as I headed toward the living room, where I found Maya. She was sitting on the couch, staring into space, lost in thought. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant, she must have sensed that something had shifted, that I'd reached a breaking point. I took a deep breath, not sure where to start, not sure if there was anything left to salvage. "Liam found out," I said, my voice cracking. The weight of those words hit her, and she slumped back into the couch, her face going pale. Kids at school heard about it, Maya. They told him everything. She brought her hands to her face, the guilt written all over her. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted him to know. I never wanted to hurt him." I stared at her, incredulous. "You didn't want him to know? Maya, did you think you could just hide this forever? You've been lying to me, to him, to everyone, and now it's all crashing down. Liam has to carry this around now because of your choices." She looked away, tears spilling over, but I couldn't feel pity. Not now. All I could think of was the confusion and anger in Liam's eyes, the way he looked at me like he was searching for something solid to hold on to. "Why, Maya?" I asked, my voice quieter. "I need to understand. Why did you do this? With Jay, of all people. And why keep it going for so long, knowing what it would do to our family?" She took a shaky breath, her eyes red and tired. I don't know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense," she whispered. "I was feeling lost. Lonely, I guess. Jay, he just listened. And I don't know why I let it go on for as long as I did. I knew it was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was harmless, that it wouldn't mean anything in the end." Her words hit me like a blow. "Harmless," I repeated, barely able to contain my anger. "How could you ever think something like this was harmless? Do you even realize the damage you've done?" She looked down, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I know I've hurt you, and I know I've hurt Liam. I don't expect forgiveness, but I never meant for things to end up this way." I shook my head, feeling a wave of bitterness wash over me. "You might not have meant it, but here we are. Liam's hurt, I'm hurt, and our family. It's like everything we built was a lie." She started to reach for me, but I stepped back, my hands clenched at my sides. "I can't do this anymore, Maya. I've been trying to find a way to move forward, to forgive you, but every time I look at you, I just see betrayal. I see the person who lied to me, who lied to our son." She took a deep breath, her voice breaking. "Please, give us a chance to fix this. Let's go to counseling. Do whatever it takes to heal. For Liam, if nothing else." I took a step back, shaking my head. "I don't know if there's anything left to fix, Maya. Maybe we can do this for Liam, but for us, I just don't see a way forward anymore." And with that, I left the room, feeling more exhausted than ever. The walls around me seemed to close in, and for the first time, I realized that my home, our home, had become nothing more than a reminder of everything that had gone wrong that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I kept running through my conversation with Maya, trying to untangle the emotions that had built up over weeks of discovery, betrayal, and anger. The thought of separating felt like admitting defeat, like giving up on the life I had fought to build. But holding on to this shattered version of our marriage seemed even harder. I got up around dawn, feeling restless. I made coffee, hoping it would clear my mind, but the quiet of the kitchen only amplified the ache in my chest. Liam's door was still closed, and I could tell he hadn't slept much either. A wave of guilt washed over me as I realized that I had no choice but to tell him that we were separating. I couldn't bear for him to see us tear each other apart any longer. He deserved peace, even if it was in a broken home. I walked back to our bedroom where Maya was lying in bed, awake but silent. She looked at me, her eyes still puffy from crying, and I could see that she already knew what I was going to say. I sat on the edge of the bed, searching for words that wouldn't make this even harder than it already was. "Maya, I can't keep doing this," I said quietly, my voice barely steady. "This isn't good for any of us. Not for me, not for you, and definitely not for Liam. We're just hurting each other, and I don't want him to be caught in the middle of it." She nodded slowly, the tears beginning to fall again. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" I took a deep breath, feeling the finality of the words. "I don't know. I just know I need space. I can't think straight, can't feel anything but this constant pain, and I don't see how that changes while we're still here, together. Maybe separation is the only way to get some clarity, to figure out if there's anything left worth fighting for." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I felt a pang of regret, remembering the years we'd spent together, the laughter, the late nights we'd stayed up talking, the dreams we'd shared. But the betrayal stood between us like a wall, too tall, too solid to simply break down with words. This was bigger than just an apology. It was deeper than just regret. "Okay," she whispered. "If that's what you need, then I won't fight you on it." I nodded, feeling the weight of relief and sadness at once. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding on to, trying to keep everything together, and now, admitting that I couldn't was like finally letting go of something that had been slowly tearing me apart. "I'll tell Liam," I said softly. "He deserves to hear it from me, and I want him to understand that none of this is his fault, that we both love him." Maya wiped her tears and managed a weak smile. "He's a strong kid. He'll get through this." But I wasn't so sure. I knew that Liam had already been hurt more than we'd probably ever know. I could only hope that by taking this step, by giving him a home where he wasn't constantly exposed to the tension between us, we might spare him some of the damage. Later that afternoon, I called Liam into the living room, where Maya and I sat side by side, ready to explain. His face tensed, and I could tell he was expecting the worst. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself for what I had to say. "Liam," I began, my voice trembling, "your mom and we've decided that it's best for us to take a break. We're going to separate, at least for now. It's not what we wanted, but it's something we both think is best for everyone." He stared at us, his expression unreadable. "So, what does that mean? Are you getting a divorce?" I looked at Maya, who gave me a slight nod. "Not yet," I said, choosing my words carefully. "We're just taking some time apart. We need space to figure things out, and I hope you understand that none of this is your fault. You're the most important thing to us, and we both love you, no matter what happens." Liam swallowed, blinking back tears. "I get it. I just didn't think it would come to this." Neither had I. But as I watched him struggle to accept our decision, I felt a faint sense of hope. Maybe space was what we all needed to heal, even if it was painful now. As I hugged him, I silently promised myself that, whatever happened next, I would do everything in my power to be the father he deserved. After our talk, I began looking for a place to stay, somewhere nearby so I could still be a steady presence for Liam. I settled on a small apartment about 10 minutes away. Packing up my things was surreal, like I was sleepwalking through a bad dream. As I loaded my boxes into the car, I felt the weight of leaving my home, our home, the place where we'd built a life, a family, and now I was walking away from it all. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Liam before I left that first time. He was trying to be strong, putting on a brave face, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. I hugged him tightly, promising him that nothing would change between us, that I'd always be there whenever he needed me. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Things had already changed, in ways I couldn't control. As I drove to my new apartment, a strange mix of relief and grief settled over me. I was leaving behind the constant reminder of betrayal, the strained conversations, and the empty smiles. But I was also leaving behind the life I thought I'd have. For the first time, I truly faced the possibility that my marriage might be over. Life in the apartment was quiet, too quiet. I'd been so used to the noise, the life of our house, that the silence felt oppressive. I threw myself into work, staying late most nights to keep my mind off everything. But even then, the memories would creep in. I'd think about Maya, about the nights we'd spent talking about our future, about how our family felt solid and unbreakable. Now it felt like those memories belonged to someone else. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Liam, picking him up on weekends, taking him out to dinner, and making sure he knew I was there for him. But each time he left, the loneliness would sink back in. I was still grieving the loss of my marriage, but I was also starting to understand that maybe some distance was what I needed to heal. A few weeks into the separation, Maya reached out, asking if we could meet. I was hesitant. Part of me didn't want to see her, to reopen wounds that were just starting to scab over. But another part of me was curious. Maybe she'd changed. Maybe she had something important to say. We met at a coffee shop, a neutral place where I felt like I had control. She looked nervous, her eyes tired and her hands fidgeting. She apologized again, saying she'd been going to counseling and that she was starting to understand the depth of what she'd done. She wanted to try couples therapy to see if we could rebuild. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I told her I'd think about it, that I needed time. After she left, I sat there, replaying her words. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that there was something left to salvage. But I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. After some thought, I agreed to try counseling, figuring it was worth a shot. Maya and I met with a therapist who guided us through our pain, anger, and fears. It was exhausting, bringing up everything I tried to bury, but it was also freeing. Maya opened up about her loneliness, her feelings of inadequacy, her regrets. And for the first time, I listened without the wall of anger between us. It didn't erase the betrayal, but I could see a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward. Maybe there was a version of us that could heal, that could become something stronger than before. But deep down, I still wasn't sure if I could forgive her. Yes, Maya, and I tried to work through our issues. Liam began to struggle. He was distant, withdrawn, his grades slipping. I talked to him, tried to reassure him, but he'd just nod and say he was fine. It was clear he was carrying the weight of our separation, and I felt helpless, knowing I'd brought this pain into his life. One night, he finally broke down, confessing how angry and confused he was. He didn't understand why this was happening, why his family was falling apart. I held him as he cried, feeling the weight of every mistake, every hurtful word, every shattered promise. I wished I could take his pain away, but I knew all I could do was be there for him, to show him that he wasn't alone. Months passed, and slowly, through counseling and countless conversations, Maya and I began to find a fragile peace. She was consistent, showing me that she was committed to making things right. Little by little, I started to feel the anger melt away, replaced by something else. Maybe it was understanding, maybe it was forgiveness. I could see how broken she was, how deeply she regretted her choices, and I realized that holding on to my pain was only hurting me. One evening, after a particularly intense counseling session, I told her that I forgave her. It wasn't easy, and I knew it didn't erase the past, but it was a step forward, a way to start letting go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. With forgiveness came a chance for a new beginning. Maya and I decided to move back in together, but this time, we were both committed to rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and trust. It wasn't easy, and there were days when doubt crept in, when the memories of betrayal resurfaced. But each day, we chose to stay, to fight for our family, to show Liam that love and forgiveness could triumph over pain. Slowly, life settled into a new rhythm. Liam began to heal, and our family found a new sense of stability. Maya and I weren't the same people we'd been before the affair. But maybe that was okay. Maybe this new version of us was stronger, wiser, more resilient. In the end, our story wasn't perfect. It was messy, filled with pain and regret, but also with love, hope, and redemption. We had weathered the storm, and while our hearts bore the scars, we had found a way to rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, I looked at Maya and felt not just the weight of the past, but the promise of the future.